Hello and welcome to DCAP's guide on making a dice, and the idea is to make a D20, 20-sided dice, dodecahedron, and there's an example of one I've made earlier. And I try and roll it, and it's rolled a 20. How cool is that? Let's roll it again, just to show it doesn't always roll 20s, and that's a 15. So there's the size of the dice that I'm going to try and make, and this is the size of a normal dice. So obviously if I compare the two, it's quite a bit bigger, about twice as big. I've found that I can't get much smaller because it's very hard to sculpt. So how to sculpt a D20? Well, you need to get hold of yourself of a net like this one, D20 net, which you can download or maybe screen capture if I can get it right. There you go. You don't have to use the same numbering as them, and I'll go on about that a bit later. So there's the net which you print onto card, and then you Pritt stick and glue together and make a cardboard D20 like that. And this is what you're going to use with this is you're going to make an impression into plaster of Paris using the card, and you can fill the card with blue tack or some of the undone Fido. Here's some of it. So you fill that in, make it solid, and then you create a bowl of plaster of Paris, and as it's setting, to do the plaster of Paris you basically put a half full of water and then you fill with plaster of Paris until it turns into kind of it can't absorb anymore, and that's when you've put enough plaster of Paris in. You give it a lot of shaking to get rid of the bubbles, and as it's setting it gets firmer and firmer, and when it's still impressionable you stick in the card things that you've made. You make about 6 of them and you push them in and leave them to set, and you push them in about halfway through because you're only looking to get one side of the dice, and when it would be one side I mean 5 sides of them. There's, as it's a 20-sided dice, what we're going to do is construct it out of 4 sets of 5. So you end up with something like this, which is the plaster of Paris with the cardboard moulds, and I've had to destroy the cardboard to get them out. And you experiment, and I've found that one of them was particularly good for making the shape that I needed, which is 5 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you put a little bit of Vaseline in there to make it easier to get out again. You'd need the Fido or modelling clay until it's warm and malleable, and then you stick it in and you make an impression. It doesn't have to be exact because you're going to cut off the excess, and you normally find that one thing is a lot of it, and you end up with an impression of a 5 sides like that. So that gives you a rough idea of the mould, and then you use a normal knife to chop it off, and you chop each side until you've got an exact. So it's a little bit smoothed, and the idea is you keep the shape of it and you use the crafting knife edge, or just ordinary kitchen knife, to keep a nice sharp edge, stop it getting too round. You need these edges to be flat so it rolls. And there's one. And you do that 4 times. 3 of them you're going to stick and together to start the structure, and the 4th one you chop to put together, which I'll show you a bit later. So if I try and do this as quick as possible. Next one, push it in. The knife to cut off the excess, trying to keep a nice edge. this one. So bit of Vaseline in the cast, make sure it releases, doesn't get stuck in it. As you're chopping, you can push in and use the knife to get a bit more of an edge if it starts to bulge a bit. There's 3 of them. Those will go together to create the structure, and then you need 1 more which you'll chop into pieces to fit in to the structure. So let's get 1 more ready. Bit of kneading. Chop it off. You don't need a great deal of clay to actually get 5 sides. So there's 5, 10, 15 sides. I'm going to make another one for 20 sided. And then I'm rushing this a bit. I'd normally take a bit more time to make sure they're perfect casts. That's the 5th one, which we are going to chop to bits to fit in with the other 3. So put that away. So we have 3 of them, and if you look at the structure of a dice, then just put 2 together like so, and it's starting to take shape. Then we stick the 3rd one, link it together, and what we're looking to do is form a single triangle space at the bottom and a kind of open-ended space. So we've got 1 spare triangle there and a kind of mess there which we're going to fit in later. And this is where the spare one comes in. We chop that. We chop 1 triangle face out. I'm not sure what the mass tune is saying about all this, but okay. So we fitted 1 triangle in there. It's all looking a bit mushy, so we'll have to go over with the knife to straighten the edges, and here we're going to have to poke out as well. And we've chopped the other remains of the face into 2 double triangles. Fit them in. I think what I'll do is I'll chop them again just into singles. So we've got the whole shape, and all we've got left is to fill in this bit. So we fill in each corner. a rough shape, don't know if you can see that, of a D20. It's all looking a bit blobby, so what you have to do is go over with the modelling knife and spend a great deal of time straightening the edges out and sharpening it all up and getting it right. If it fails on you a few times, what you have to do is start again, and start with making the impressions as sharp as possible, and eventually use the flat edge of the knife to sharpen all the edges, and you end up with something like that. And when it's as perfect as you can make it by hand, you bake it. And when you bake it, you make sure there's no food in the thing, about 30 minutes to an hour, and it becomes rock hard. And what you do with it then is you make sure there are no edges. You might need to use a file to flatten anything that's got too bulbous, and then you use some numbers. I experimented with hole number punches, but it didn't really work very well. So gold numbers or silver numbers that you get from a craft shop, and small as you can get hold of, and then you end up with a dice like this. And what I do is I roll the dice, and the great thing about making a handcrafted dice is it's not perfect, so there'll be a distribution of numbers. So you roll a dice and you'll find its favoured side, and to do that you use a dry wiper pen, a bit like this one, and you roll the dice a lot of times when it's after it's been cooked and baked, and you put a dot on each face that turns up as you roll it. So you end up being able to find out what is the favoured side of the dice, and that will be your 20-sided start point. So you put the 20 on the die, the roll it seems to prefer. You roll it a lot of times, you'll get an idea of the distribution. Opposite to 20, you should have the 1, which you should, every time you put a good number on the top, you should make very sure that the bottom number is as flat as it can be. So you might want to file that a bit. There's a couple of numbers I did on this one which are a little bit rocky, and really I should have made sure that the bottom number, say for example this 18, is a 3, because they should all add up to 21. So should really flatten that out and made sure it wasn't quite so rolly. And that should encourage the lower numbers to hit the ground and stay rather than the top numbers. And there you have a 20-sided dice which likes to roll high. There's an 8. It's still a distribution of numbers, but it's just slightly better. I hope that you found that helpful.